Collapses do not erase wealth. They simply move it from the unprepared to the well-informed. That is the truth economists rarely say out loud. Every crisis presented to the public as an unpredictable accident begins as a slow-forming imbalance noticed first by those who study incentives, not headlines. Ordinary savers see stability because they are told to. Billionaires see tensions because they pay attention to the parts no one talks about. And so the cycle begins again. Hidden imbalances grow quietly. Public reassurance follows, packaged in confident speeches and comforting statistics. Then the sudden collapse arrives, always described as unavoidable. But for a small circle who anticipated it, collapse becomes a moment of accumulation. They buy what panic forces others to sell. They rise as everyone else falls. And the most unsettling truth is not in the past. At all, it's in the present. The early stages are already visible. This is not theory. This has happened 3 times already, and each time the rich walked away stronger. Case number 1. The 1923 German saver wipeout. In 1923, Germans watched their lives shrink one sunrise at a time. Shopkeepers who once counted coins by the dozen now weighed banknotes by the kilo. Pensioners carried their life savings in canvas bags, only to discover that the value inside had fallen between breakfast and noon. Workers demanded wages twice a day because a single afternoon could turn a week's pay into loose paper. This is the version of Weimar collapse. People remember the suffering, the chaos, the wheelbarrows of money, but it is not the full story. What most never learn is how a small circle of industrialists saw the collapse forming long before the public did. They borrowed money aggressively, bought factories, shipping fleets, and farmland with marks they knew would soon be worthless, and then repaid those loans with currency so devalued it might as well have been ash. Exporters with political connections thrived as the collapsing mark made their goods artificially cheap abroad. While the government repeated its reassuring line that the mark is stable, these elites quietly moved their wealth into foreign currencies, gold, and real assets that inflation could not touch. By the time ordinary Germans knew what was happening, the elites had already secured every inflation-proof asset they could find. And once again, savers paid the highest price for believing stability was guaranteed. Case number 2. The 1933 Yukon gold seizure. In 1933, Americans woke to a decree unlike anything the country had seen. By executive order, private ownership of gold was now illegal. Ordinary citizens, already shaken by years of depression, were told this was an act of patriotism and emergency measure to save the nation. They handed over coins and bars they had saved for decades and accepted paper dollars in return. What they did not know was that the moment their gold entered government vaults, the rules would quietly change. Weeks later, the dollar was devalued and gold was officially overnight. Every surrendered ounce became roughly 40% more valuable only. The gain no longer belonged to the people who had earned it. It belonged to the state. Yet this sacrifice was far from universal. Wealthy families had already moved gold into offshore accounts, trusts, and corporate structures beyond the reach of the order. Politically connected bankers who sensed the revaluation coming positioned themselves to profit from the new price rather than suffer from it. The contradiction was stark. The public heard calls for unity and national duty. Behind the curtain, the elite prepared for a windfall. The message was sacrifice for the nation. But the people sacrificing were never the ones giving the speeches. Case number 3. Cyprus, 2013. The first modern bailout. In 2013, Cyprus became the place where a new kind of collapse quietly debuted. There were no wheelbarrows of cash, no long lines outside banks, just a cold digital silence. One morning, ordinary savers logged into their accounts and discovered that part of their balance had simply vanished. It wasn't a glitch, it was a bail-in, a forced sacrifice to rescue the banking system, using the deposits of the very people who trusted it. Publicly, European officials had spent weeks insisting that Cypriot banks were strong and that depositors had nothing to fear. Privately. Leaked documents later showed they knew exactly who would be wiped out. Small savers with no influence, no offshore accounts, and no warning. But there's a detail history rarely highlights. The biggest depositors, Russian oligarchs, multinational executives, Politically connected businessmen had quietly transferred their money out in the weeks before the freeze. They moved first because they were informed first. The average citizen never stood a chance. Their savings were frozen, then carved down to plug the system's holes, while the elite walked away untouched. This was the first test run, and the world barely noticed. It marked the beginning of a new era where collapse could happen not in streets, but on screens, fast, silent, and almost invisible. Across every era, in every crisis, the wealthiest players rely on the same quiet playbook. They understand that cash is fragile. So long before the public senses danger, they convert it into real assets: land, energy, shipping, factories, anything that cannot be devalued by the stroke of a pen. They move wealth outside national banking systems, spreading it across jurisdictions, trusts, and corporate structures that shield them from local shocks. When panic hits and markets seize, they buy debt 4 cents on the dollar, knowing that governments will eventually rescue the very institutions they now partially own. And to ensure those rescues unfold in their favor, they fund the politicians who design the packages, shaping the rules before the public even knows a crisis exists. They push patriotic narratives that encourage ordinary citizens to stand together, trust the system, and make necessary sacrifices. But behind closed doors, they are offloading risk, not absorbing it. The tactics never change, only the tools do. In Weimar, it was factories and farmland. In 1933, it was offshore gold. In Cyprus, it was digital capital flight. The only thing that changes is the technology, not the incentives. Ordinary savers lose first because they keep their money exactly where the system can reach it. Their savings sit in banks, in accounts that cannot move without permission, paperwork, or notice. Governments depend on this immobility. It gives them time, liquidity, and leverage during moments of stress. When cracks appear, officials reassure the public precisely because they need savers to stay still while they quietly prepare behind the scenes. But in every crisis, the first shock always hits depositors, not elites. Bank failures drain insured reserves long before wealthy clients feel a ripple. Inflation erodes the wages and savings of the middle class, while those holding real assets watch their wealth rise with every price increase. And when capital controls arrive, they trap only the people who followed the rules, not those who saw the pattern early enough to move their money elsewhere. Savers obey the system. Elites design it. That contrast defines every collapse in modern history. When collapse begins, the slowest mover loses the most. Savers are always the slowest mover, and unless they understand why, the next shock will find them exactly where the last generation stood, frozen, waiting, and unprotected. Today's warnings don't look dramatic. They look administrative, technical, almost invisible. In banking laws across the West, quiet clauses now allow for digital bilansta, same mechanism tested in Cyprus, but faster and easier to execute. Government debts are rising at speeds that mirror the late stages of past collapses, yet officials deliver the same steady reassurances that everything is under control. At the very same moment, billionaire families are accumulating hard assets, private equity stakes, farmland, and energy infrastructure with a level of urgency that rarely makes headlines. The pattern is not forming, it is already formed. We are living between stage 3, where tensions become impossible to hide, and stage 4, where consolidation begins. This is the point where history speeds up fast enough that most people don't even realize a transfer is happening. And once the shift becomes visible, it is usually too late for the public to respond. The signals are subtle only because the process is familiar. We have seen it before, in Germany, in America, in Cyprus. The same incentives exist, the same assurances are being repeated, and the same players are moving first. In every crisis we've explored, the same quiet truth emerges. Ordinary people trust systems that were never designed to protect their savings. They follow the rules, believe the reassurances, and hope stability will return. But history shows that stability is preserved for wealth, not for savers. The families who study patterns move early. The families who wait are forced to endure the aftermath. That is the moral weight of these stories. Crises are not just economic events, they are tests of awareness. Every collapse has a point of no return. The tragedy is that most people realize it only when their bank balance cannot be undone. Understanding the pattern is not fear, it is responsibility, clarity, and the beginning of protection.